So in today's video, we're going to be talking through our tips on how to make your makeup last longer and also to help your foundation not transfer as much onto your mask. So this is definitely mask friendly. Feel free to not even wear any foundation. But I know some people will still want to wear makeup whilst wearing a mask, so hopefully this video will help you. So if you want to learn some more tips, then just keep on watching. So the first thing that you want to do is to make sure your skin is fully hydrated with your regular moisturiser, just to ensure there are no dry patches, because wearing a mask, it can kind of aggravate any dryness, and obviously your makeup does tend to wear off in dry areas, so we'll just have to make sure we take extra care, especially during the winter, to moisturize our skin. So the next step is super important with making your makeup last, and that is using a primer before your foundation. So it kind of depends on what kind of skin type you have. So that being, if you have oily skin, you might want to go for something more mattifying. If you have enlarged pores, you would want to go for something more smoothing. And then obviously if you're a little bit more dry, you can still use a primer. You can get ones that are more hydrating, but while still making your foundation last longer. So this next step is a little bit unusual and definitely something that you wouldn't normally do, but it is a must for making your foundation last just that little bit longer. And it might sound a little bit weird, but what we're going to do is use a translucent powder before we use foundation. So what we're going to do is apply a very, very light layer over our primer, and what this is going to do is just basically help keep down any of those oils, because that's basically why your foundation will start to lift, is because the natural oils kind of come through the foundation, and that's why your foundation will start to move and slide around and kind of break up. But by putting a powder over your primer, it kind of acts as like a little bit of a barrier, but you only want to use a small amount. So to do that, I'm going to use our A01 brush. So as you can see, this is super, super fluffy, so it doesn't hold a lot of product, because that's what you want. You don't want too much powder on your skin, you just want a very, very light layer. So because we want our foundation to last under our mask, I would recommend going for more of a matte foundation, because anything too dewy is just going to slide around, and obviously it has more moisture in it and it is going to kind of transfer more onto the mask. So when applying foundation, you want to ensure that you apply it in very thin layers. So if you do prefer a full coverage, we would recommend not going in with loads of product straight away. It's always best to add it in layers, because what you want to do is kind of sandwich the product onto your skin. So by doing it in layers, that will actually make your foundation last longer. So always start off with a very, very light layer of foundation. And to do that, we're going to use our B01 brush. So this is a flat top brush, as you can see. So it's perfect for applying a light layer, because you can basically swipe it all over the skin and get a nice even amount of coverage. When you want to build up the coverage, you want to stipple or bounce the product onto the skin. So because you've got a light layer all over, what you're doing now is just building up the coverage, and again, like we said, sandwiching that product onto the skin. Because if you apply too much at once, what it's going to do is actually over time or throughout the day, it's going to start to crack. If you think about when you like paint a wall and you put too much paint on the wall, it actually cracks over time, because it's like one thick layer. So that's exactly with applying too much foundation. So that's why we always do it in very light layers. So if you suffer from acne or there's certain blemishes that you want to cover, what you can do is go in with a smaller brush and spot conceal. So you can either double up your foundation as a concealer in that area, or you can use a separate concealer over that blemish. We're going to use our A06 brush to apply our concealer. So the reason why I use a small brush is obviously it just helps to apply the product a little bit more precisely, rather than putting more coverage over a larger area where you might not necessarily need it. You can just focus it in that one area. So you just want to bounce the brush up and down onto the blemish. Then once you've got the product on there, you just want to buff around the edges, but you never want to swipe the brush over the blemish, because that's just going to move the coverage. So next you can go ahead and apply your normal concealer, and I'm going to use the same A06 brush as before to buff and blend out my concealer. If you ever feel like you have too much concealer or product on your skin, you can go ahead and use a damp sponge. This is our Pink Wonder Sponge, and you can blend out the concealer and it will just take any excess product away. So once you're happy with your base and the coverage, we can then go ahead and set our foundation. So the next step is to powder and set your foundation in place. So this next step is definitely the most important step with making your foundation last longer, and also it's going to make it transfer proof as well, because obviously when you put your foundation on, obviously it is a liquid product, so it is slightly tacky still. So some people might not set their foundation, or they might not like to, but we would 100% recommend doing this if you don't want your foundation to transfer onto your mask. You just want to bounce the brush on top of the skin because you don't want to move the coverage underneath. And make sure to really focus it in the area where your mask is going to be. We have applied our light layer of powder, and what you can do next, this next step is optional, but it is going to help those areas that will really rub off and transfer, and that is typically on the nose and the chin. So what you can do, because we've applied our light layer, we can go in with a second layer of powder, and you can be quite generous with this step. So it might look a bit crazy at first, but literally just add a second layer over those areas. So you can either use the same brush, or we quite like to use a smaller brush. This is the B06, so it's super fluffy. Because it's so small, it's going to ensure that your application is super precise. And to just apply it all over that area, again bouncing it up and down, so all about the technique and the brush that you use. And then also on the chin. And don't worry about it looking too powdery, because your natural oils will start to come through, and also we're just going to let it sit there for a few seconds. So that's why you apply a generous amount kind of in that area where you don't want it to rub off. So when you leave it there for a few seconds, it just really helps to seal that foundation in place. We're just doing it in very specific areas to ensure those areas don't rub off throughout the day. Then once you've left it on there for a few seconds, you can literally just dust off any excess with your AO1 brush. So you can go ahead and apply your normal blusher and bronzer. We would recommend using powder products for this and kind of staying clear of your cream products for now, just because if you're wearing cream, obviously they are more likely to transfer because they've got more moisture in them. This next step is vital when you're using more powder than usual, and that is using some sort of setting spray. We would obviously recommend using a setting spray that is long wearing or more mattifying. So you could always do a little test. Obviously your makeup isn't going to be completely transfer proof, but it will help just that little bit better, and also it's just going to help your foundation last longer anyway. Okay, so I've had the mask on for a few minutes. Let's push against my cheeks, against my nose. Obviously you're going to be wearing it a lot longer than this, but just so you can see how much the powder helps when you push it, because if you didn't set your foundation and you done this, it will just completely come onto the back of the mask, onto the nose. Let's do the lips and see how much of the lips. Okay, so just so I can show you, so if anything the eyeshadow dropped down, but where I pressed against the cheeks, no foundation came off on that. So that is the beauty of setting your foundation. So that is pretty much all of our tips on long wearing makeup and how to ensure that your foundation doesn't transfer onto your mask. Obviously it will transfer a little bit. There's no getting away from it transferring at all, but it will help prevent it transferring a lot. So hopefully those tips helped you. Obviously you don't have to do every single step. You can obviously take elements and apply it to your own makeup routine. We really hope you learned something new today. Let us know what you want to learn next, and you'll see us in our next one. Bye!